lonely driver in Wales claims he was taken aboard a craft and shown worlds beyond Pluto. In Spain, a truck driver encounters silent figures and glowing objects on 2 terrifying nights along a deserted highway. And in the hills of rural France, mysterious silhouettes appear beside an unexplained light in the darkness. Welcome to Strange Encounters. At around 3 o'clock in the morning, a man known publicly only as David Thomas was making his way toward town along an isolated road in the freezing darkness of the Welsh countryside. The night was bitterly cold. Frost covered the nearby grass fields, and according to the witness, the silence around him suddenly became unnatural. Then came the sound, a low humming noise. At first, David could not determine where it was coming from, but as he listened more carefully, he noticed something else, a strange stillness in the air around him, as though the entire environment had somehow been muted. Curious and uneasy, he left the roadside and walked toward a frozen field nearby to investigate. What he claimed to see there would stay with him for the rest of his life. Hovering roughly 2 feet above the ground was a large black object. David described it as dull and disc-shaped with a domed upper section. The craft emitted what he called a faint fluorescent glow, though its surface itself appeared dark and almost matte black against the winter landscape. As he stared at the object, more details became visible. He later claimed the craft appeared to have antenna-like structures, small windows, and what resembled a hatch or drawbridge positioned on top of the object. The witness estimated the craft may have been around 25 feet across, and then he realized he was no longer alone. Moving rapidly toward him from a nearby field was a group of small humanoid figures. David turned to run, but another figure suddenly appeared behind him, blocking his escape. He later claimed he felt a hand grip his arm, and almost instantly he was propelled toward the strange object against his will. According to the account, the beings never spoke aloud. Instead, communication came directly into his mind. He said the entities telepathically assured him that he would not be harmed. Moments later, David found himself inside the object. The interior was reportedly sparse and strangely empty. He described standing in a large bare room before being left alone by the entities for several minutes. The humanoids themselves were unlike the stereotypical gray aliens commonly described in UFO lore. David said they appeared vaguely man-like but robotic in behavior. They wore gray suits with gold-colored belts and strap-like braces running over their shoulders. Their hands were covered by black gloves, and they wore black knee-high boots. Most disturbing of all were their helmets. The witness described them as octagonal in shape and almost featureless except for 2 dim glowing lights where eyes should have been. Their movements, he claimed, were stiff, rapid, and mechanical. Eventually, the beings escorted him into another chamber that resembled a control room. There, he reportedly observed several television-like consoles along with a large viewing screen mounted on a wall. Again, communication came telepathically. The beings allegedly informed him he was being decontaminated and prepared for what they described as a time change. Shortly afterward, David became aware that the craft had taken off. What followed is where the story moves far beyond a conventional UFO encounter and into the realm of high strangeness contact narratives. The witness claimed he watched planets pass across the large screen as though he were traveling through space itself. He said he observed Jupiter, then Saturn, then regions beyond Pluto. According to David, the smaller craft eventually docked with a much larger mothership somewhere deep in space. Inside the larger object, the witness claimed he underwent a medical examination. He later alleged the entities used instruments that left burn-like marks on his body. Much of the examination reportedly focused on his chest, neck, head, and genitals, details commonly reported in many alleged abduction cases from the 1970s and 80s. At one point, David claimed he received a chilling telepathic request. The beings allegedly asked permission to remove his eyes for examination. He refused. The entities also examined a music cassette tape he had been carrying, reportedly showing unusual interest in the object. Further telepathic exchanges supposedly revealed more extraordinary information. The beings claimed they came from a world beyond the constellation of Lyra. They allegedly breathed pure oxygen and considered Earth's atmosphere dangerously polluted. According to the witness, the entities also claimed to maintain a temporary base in Greenland and stated they had once operated bases on the moon that had since been destroyed. The conversation then shifted toward humanity's space program. David later claimed he was questioned about the United States and NASA. The entities allegedly stated they had intercepted one of the Voyager spacecraft for examination and considered human technology very primitive. Eventually, the experience came to an end. David claimed he was returned to the lonely frozen field in Wales where the encounter had begun. Some versions of the story state that a passing police officer later found him in a distressed and disoriented condition and transported him home. Reports published years later also claimed the witness displayed signs of shock and possessed unusual marks on his body after the alleged encounter. Researchers later stated that David Thomas was not the witness's real name and was instead a pseudonym used to protect his identity. The case would eventually appear in the book Without Consent by researchers Carl Nagaitis and Philip Mantle, where it became one of the stranger and more elaborate British abduction reports of the 1980s. And it is certainly a fascinating story. The robotic humanoids, the silent telepathic communication, the journey beyond Pluto, an examination aboard a mothership. It contains nearly every major element associated with classic alien abduction lore. But despite the dramatic nature of the claims, the case also presents significant problems from an investigative standpoint. There appears to be very little independent corroboration. No publicly available police records have surfaced. No physical evidence from the alleged landing site is known. No confirmed medical documentation has ever been released. And much of the story seems to originate from later interviews and recollections rather than contemporary reporting from 1985 itself. Some details also strongly reflect themes that were already widespread in UFO literature during the Cold War era, including alien concern over pollution, secret moon bases, NASA surveillance, and advanced beings evaluating human space technology. That does not mean the witness invented the story, nor does it prove the experience did not happen, but it does mean researchers today are working with limited original source material and very little verifiable evidence beyond the witness testimony itself. And that leaves the Pwllheli encounter in a category familiar to many students of UFO history, a deeply compelling story a memorable and unsettling account, but ultimately a weakly corroborated case that remains impossible to fully confirm or completely dismiss. In the early morning hours of March 21st, 1974, 21-year-old Maximiliano Iglesias Sanchez was driving along a lonely highway near the small town of Orcaco in western Spain when he encountered something that would remain with him for the rest of his life. What began as an ordinary trip home would soon turn into one of the most unusual close encounter reports to emerge from Spain during the UFO wave of the 1970s. At the time, Maximiliano, known to his friends as Maxi, worked as a truck driver for a man named Aquilino Garrado Bernal. On March 20th, he had completed a delivery assignment in the town of Pineda, and after finishing his work, spent the evening visiting his girlfriend. Around 2:15 in the morning, he began the drive back toward Lagunilla. The roads were quiet and largely deserted. As he traveled through the darkness, Maxi noticed a powerful white light shining ahead on the highway. At first, he assumed it belonged to a truck or an automobile approaching from the opposite direction. There was nothing particularly unusual about it, but as he drove closer, something began to feel wrong. While he was still several hundred meters away, he realized the light wasn't moving. Then, when the distance between himself and the light had narrowed to roughly 200 meters, his truck suddenly failed. The engine stopped. The headlights went dark. The vehicle rolled to a halt. Looking ahead, Maxi realized the source of the light was not another vehicle at all. Sitting directly on the roadway was a strange metallic object. According to his estimate, the craft was approximately 10 to 12 meters in diameter. It stood on 3 short, rounded landing supports and was large enough to extend beyond both sides of the narrow highway. The surface appeared perfectly smooth. There were no visible seams, no rivets, no windows, no doors. The entire object emitted a faint, even glow, unlike any light Maxi had ever seen before. Later, he would struggle to describe it, saying only that it resembled nothing he had previously encountered. As he stared at the object, he noticed something even stranger. Hovering off to the right side of the landed craft was a second object. This one floated silently at an altitude of roughly 15 to 17 meters, or roughly 50 feet above the ground. It emitted the same unusual light, although it was noticeably dimmer. Then the situation took another unexpected turn. 2 figures suddenly appeared near the right side of the landed craft. Maxi could not determine where they had come from. He never saw a door open. He never observed them exiting the object. One moment they were absent, the next moment they were standing there. The 2 figures moved toward the center of the roadway and positioned themselves in front of the craft. Then they began gesturing with their arms. The motions appeared deliberate, as though they were attempting to communicate something to him. Maxi remained where he was. He simply watched. The figures continued signaling. At one point, one of them turned partially toward the object and disappeared from sight near the right side of the craft. Moments later, it returned and rejoined its companion. The 2 figures seemed to exchange some form of silent communication before turning and moving behind the object. A short time later, the craft began to rise. It ascended slowly into the air while emitting a sound that ceased once it came to a hovering position. Eventually, it climbed until it was level with the second object. The 2 hovered side by side, only a short distance apart. Believing the road was now clear, Maxie restarted his truck and continued his journey. After driving roughly 200 meters, curiosity got the better of him. He stopped the truck, turned off the lights, and stepped outside to watch. To his surprise, the illuminated object began descending again toward the same location where it had originally landed. At that point, Maxie decided he had seen enough. He climbed back into the truck and quickly drove away. The following morning, he described the experience to friends. No one believed him. His employer, however, reacted differently. After hearing the account, Aquilino Garrido stated that Maxie was a serious, hard-working young man and not someone prone to inventing stories. But the strangest part of the encounter was still to come. Later that same day, Maxie returned to Panida on another delivery assignment. Once again, he spent time with his girlfriend. This time, however, he told her in detail about the events of the previous night. She became concerned. In fact, she urged him to remain in town until morning rather than travel the same road after dark. Maxie chose to leave anyway. At approximately 11 o'clock that night, he started the drive back. Only 15 minutes later, he reached the same stretch of highway where the previous encounter had occurred. And there they were. This time, there were 3 luminous objects. According to Maxie, the objects appeared to follow his truck for a short distance before descending into a nearby field and settling onto the ground in a straight row. Instead of fleeing, he decided to watch. He stopped the truck, turned off the engine, switched off the lights, and observed. Each object emitted the same soft glow he had witnessed the previous night. The light remained steady and unchanged. The 3 objects were separated by roughly 8 or 9 meters or 25 to 30 feet. Then, once again, figures appeared. This time there were 4 of them. As before, Maxie never observed where they came from. They simply appeared near the objects and moved into the roadway. The figures gathered together, gesturing among themselves while occasionally looking in his direction. They began signaling toward him. A moment later, they started walking down the highway, toward his truck, toward him. At first, they moved at a normal pace. Maxie panicked. He opened the passenger side door and jumped from the vehicle. Then he ran. As he fled down the road, he repeatedly looked back over his shoulder. Each time he glanced behind him, the figures seemed closer. The distance between them was shrinking. Eventually, he spotted a roadside ditch and threw himself into it. Pressed himself flat against the ground, he remained motionless. The figures continued approaching, closer, closer still. According to Maxie, they came so near that they almost touched him, yet somehow they never discovered him. The 4 beings moved past his hiding place and began searching the surrounding area for a short distance. Then they gradually moved away. Seeing an opportunity, Maxie scrambled from the ditch and ran toward the town of Orcaco. Nearly a mile later, he reached the outskirts of town. Only then did he stop. For approximately 10 minutes, he remained there, trying to gather enough courage to return. Eventually, he decided he could not abandon his truck, so he headed back. When he arrived, the 3 objects were still present in the field. The figures, however, were nowhere to be seen. Believing it might be safe, Maxie cautiously approached the vehicle. Immediately, he noticed something disturbing. The passenger side door was now closed. He distinctly remembered leaving it open when he fled. Unsure of what might be waiting inside, he carefully inspected the truck before climbing in. When he attempted to start the engine, nothing happened. Then the four figures reappeared. Walking silently along the roadway, they moved back toward the objects. As before, they vanished near the craft. Moments later, one of the objects rose into the air and hovered at an altitude of roughly 15 to 17 meters or 50 feet. Maxie tried the ignition again. This time, the truck started. He drove away, but not very far. Despite everything that had happened, curiosity once again overcame fear. After traveling approximately 200 meters, he stopped. He got out and began walking back toward the objects, quietly, carefully. This time he approached to within 8 or 9 meters, close enough to study the nearest craft in detail. The surface appeared completely smooth. There were no visible openings of any kind, no doors, no hatches, nothing that explained how the figures entered or exited it. Then he noticed the beings once more. The four figures appeared to be working on a roadside embankment. Two held strange T-shaped instruments. A third carried an object resembling a horseshoe. The fourth stood nearby. They worked silently. No voices, no mechanical sounds, no indication they had noticed the witness observing them from the darkness. The figures wore tight-fitting suits that covered their entire bodies. The material appeared metallic and reflective, yet also possessed a flexible quality reminiscent of rubber. Maxie estimated their height at roughly 6 feet 4 inches to 6 feet 8 inches. Although their bodies appeared human in shape, he could not make out any facial details. The same smooth material that covered their bodies also concealed their faces. For approximately 3 minutes, Maxie remained hidden and watched. His curiosity urged him to continue observing. His fear told him to leave. Fear eventually won. He returned to his truck and completed the journey home without further incident. The following day, he reported the experience. Investigators later accompanied him back to the location. According to reports, they found marks in the field where the objects had allegedly landed. On the roadway itself, they discovered a gouged linear mark that appeared to have been made by something heavy. Investigators also noted unusual impressions on the roadside embankment in the area where Maxie had observed the figures using their strange instruments. No additional evidence was recovered. The events reported by Maximiliano Iglesias Sanchez remain unexplained. Skeptics have questioned aspects of the account, particularly why did he not immediately bring witnesses from Horcaco back to the scene? Others point out that a frightened 21-year-old truck driver might reasonably hesitate before telling strangers that he had encountered glowing craft and faceless figures on a lonely road in the middle of the night. Whatever the explanation may be, Maxie maintained his story, and if his account is accurate, then for 2 consecutive nights in March of 1974, a young Spanish truck driver found himself in the presence of silent beings, mysterious craft, and a phenomenon that remains unsolved to this day. In the early 1950s, long before UFOs became a familiar part of popular culture, rural France was still a landscape defined by isolation, agriculture, and quiet routines that rarely changed from one season to the next. It is in this environment that one of the more obscure reports emerges, recorded not through official investigation, but through later regional compilations of anomalous sightings. The location is the Correze region, a rural area of central France characterized by wooded hills, scattered farmland, and narrow winding roads that connect small villages separated by large stretches of uninhabited land. According to the account, the witness was a local resident traveling or working near the outskirts of one of these rural settlements during the early hours of the night. There is no precise timestamp preserved in the surviving material, only a general indication that the event occurred after dark when visibility was reduced and the surrounding landscape would have been largely empty of activity. What the witness reported begins with light in the sky. It was described as luminous, steady, and moving slowly above the tree line, not erratic like lightning, and not consistent with any known aircraft of the period as perceived by the observer. At first, the witness reportedly assumed it might be a distant aircraft or a rural lighting phenomena reflecting off mist or cloud cover, but as the object continued to move, the account shifts from simple observation into something more unusual. The light appeared to descend or stabilize at a lower altitude, hovering near the edge of a wooded hill. At this point, the witness reportedly stopped or slowed movement, focusing attention on the area where the light was positioned. What followed is the most uncertain part of the account, because here the narrative becomes less precise and more interpretive. Within or near the glow of the object, the witness described seeing two small figures, not clearly defined bodies and not described in anatomical detail. Instead, the terminology used in later summaries refers to them as shapes or silhouettes. These figures were reportedly positioned close to the luminous source, but there is no indication of interaction between them and the environment. They did not appear to move toward the witness, they did not appear to communicate, and no sound was reported. The observation lasted only a brief moment before the figures were no longer visible. The light itself either moved away or dimmed beyond perceptibility, depending on which later summary of the account is referenced. There's no indication that the witness attempted direct pursuit or closer approach, which is consistent with many rural nighttime reports of the era, where uncertainty and caution often prevented further investigation in real time. What makes this case notable in ufology literature is not the detail of the encounter itself, but its preservation. It does not come from a structured scientific investigation. It does not come from police documentation or medical examination. Instead, it appears in later compilations of regional anomalous reports, where it is grouped alongside similar sightings from the same geographical era and time period. And in those compilations, a pattern begins to emerge. Across multiple rural accounts in France during the 1950s, there are repeated references to luminous aerial objects over isolated terrain, brief humanoid silhouettes near or within light sources, and a consistent lack of interaction or physical trace evidence. However, none of these accounts are strong enough individually to stand as verified events. They exist instead as fragments, small observational claims preserved outside of formal investigative systems. From a research perspective, this raises an important distinction. There is a difference between an event that is documented and verified at the time it occurs and an event that is reconstructed later through secondary reporting. This case belongs firmly in the second category, which does not make it meaningless, but it does change how it must be interpreted. Possible explanations range widely. It may represent misinterpretation of distant artificial light sources in rural atmospheric conditions. it may reflect memory reconstruction influenced by later exposure to UFO narratives, which became increasingly widespread in Europe during the following decades. Or it may represent a genuine but poorly documented observational anomaly that was never investigated in sufficient detail to resolve. What we cannot do as researchers is treat it as a confirmed contact. We can only treat it as a reported observation preserved through secondary channels, and that distinction is essential, because without it, we risk collapsing all categories of testimony into a single undifferentiated narrative, and that is where analysis loses meaning. So this case remains where it has always been in the record, at the edge of documentation, not confirmed, not disproven, but recorded and preserved only in fragments of regional memory. Thank you for taking the time to watch and for supporting the channel. Every view, every comment, and every bit of support truly means a lot and helps keep these stories going. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I always appreciate hearing from you. I'll see you in the next episode of Strange Encounters.